How's it going, guys? Ricky Summer here. Today I've come back in time to straighten myself up in my chair. Last week we talked about how I do my mastering in Reaper, and this week we're going to talk about mixing. Cue the intro. So this is a track from my upcoming EP. This one's called Night Grind, and I'm not 100% satisfied with how I've mixed it. So we're going to use it as a case study for general mixing principles. So the way I see it, mixing is about creating space. You want each instrument to be clear and sound out on their own. Not so much that it's like big valleys between each instrument. You want them to be glued together nicely. But if you've got two instruments, for example, and they're kind of competing for attention, you cut some frequencies in one to leave room for the other. So I'm going to show you an example here. We've got a lead track up here and an arpeggiator that are playing at the same time. And I like how they complement each other, but I think maybe at certain parts it gets a little muddy. They're stepping on each other's toes. So first, I'm going to play this section for you so you can hear what it sounds like. So notice how they sound kind of similar. They occupy a similar frequency range. A good example of that, phone quiet down, is the bass is low, right? So if you've got a voice also singing low, then it might be difficult to hear one or the other super clearly. So let's bring up the EQ for each of these tracks. This is the lead, and over here is the ARP. So you'll notice straight off the bat, I've just cut the lower frequencies. We don't need them. The bass is filling that anyway, so just get rid of it. We don't need the bass to compete for space in the mix. Easy. Next, we've got a couple of issues. So first up, we've got 600 hertz boosted in the lead, and that's fine. You know, I want a little bit of low, mid, lead, coming out. I don't want it to sound too piercing and high pitch. That's grating to my ear. So that's fine. I'm happy with that. But we got a little issue here because 700 is being boosted in the arpeggiator. So maybe we might get rid of that. We'll see how we go. Then we've got 4,400 hertz boosted in the lead, and that's fine. Happy with that. So it rings out nicely, it cuts through the mix, and you can tell, yep, this is the lead. As opposed to like a counter melody that you're meant to hear, but not really focus on too much. Over in the arpeggiator, we've got 2000 boosted, and that's fine. So you'll notice that 2000 sits around there. So in that gap. So something we could do to make that 2000 ring out a little nicer and make it a little clearer without raising the volume of the arpeggiator and messing up any other part of the mix, we can simply add another band here to the lead, and we can punch in 2000, and we can just dip it a little bit. Let's dip it by 2 dB, and I want to reduce the bandwidth just a little bit. Okay, let's see what that sounds like. So that's really subtle. But you might have noticed that in the lead, a lot of that airy space that just kind of sits there like a fog just covering the ground and making things murky, that sort of clears up a little bit and you can hear a little more of the arpeggiator. So let's deal with something else here. We've got this 700 hertz possibly clashing with the 600 over here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of that 700 hertz. Maybe we don't need it. Let's have a listen. I think we're on the right track. So you may have noticed when I pulled the 700 hertz back in the arpeggiator, it got a little bit muddy. There are a couple notes that sound super similar between the lead and the arpeggiator. Now that's maybe possibly something you might want. It could be a stylistic choice. There's such a thing as layering, where you take a bunch of sounds that play the exact same thing in order to create a different texture, a whole new sound. That's fine. But in this case, I don't really want to do that. I want the listener to hear the difference, hear that back and forth, the play between the lead and the arpeggiator, and go, oh yeah, that's nice. Kind of back and forth. Da, 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 da. Okay, we're on the right track. So let's get rid of that 700 and let's have a look. Where else can we cut or boost? Straight off the bat, I mean, they're playing together. Our whole goal here is to give each one space. So something really easy we can do is just change this from 700 hertz boost to a 600 cut. The reasoning being that we're making space for that 600 boost in the lead. Let's just see what it sounds like. There you go. Again, super subtle, but you may have noticed that the lead rang out a little bit clearer. So we haven't had to boost anything in the lead. We haven't had to raise the volume, nothing. We're just taking away some frequencies that are stepping on the toes of important frequencies in the lead. So I've got a little bit of an issue now. I feel like this is great. We're on the right track, but the arpeggiator feels a little bit gutted. I want it to ring out a little bit more in certain areas. So let's see if we can find a frequency that we can maybe boost, or a frequency that we can cut in the lead. So I don't necessarily want to boost up high, but just for the sake of exercise, let's actually test it out. So our top frequency here that we're boosting is 4,400. So if we boost, oh man, let's say about 6,000, and let's cut the bandwidth there to 0.5. Let's see what that sounds like. You know what? That actually works. I wasn't expecting that to work, but I think that actually works. It makes the arpeggiator feel a little fuller. So let's have a look. What's that frequency doing in the lead? Let's find that band. What was it? 6,000. 6,000. Okay, so that's sort of the tail end of this boost here. I'm not too sad about that. So what this ends up doing is it gives me back a little bit of that kind of thickness, you know? Before we started remixing this, these two tracks were kind of glued together and swimming in this just soup of sound. And adding just that ever so slight overlap, I think brings back that feeling. I like that. I like that concept. I like that sound, but I wanted to hear the individual parts a little clearer. And I think we've reached a little bit of a compromise with that. Yeah, we could maybe boost that a little further. We could say 7,000. Okay, so what I've just done, I don't like. It seems pretty clear that the instrument I'm using in the ARP rings out real nice around where the lead is ringing out. So I've got a couple options. I can cut what I just did, pull this back to, what was it, 6,000, and just deal with that little bit of an overlap, which I think I might do because I didn't mind it. It's still clearer than it was when we started the video, but you know, it's still swimming in that kind of nebulous soup a little bit. Alternatively, we can actually change the instrument in the ARP to something that doesn't ring out exactly where the lead rings out, or we could change the instrument in the lead, but I don't want to do that. There's something else we can try. which is panning. Panning is adjusting which ear the instrument sounds louder in, essentially. So by default, everything is panned down the center. It means it's coming out equally in the left and right ear. So if we pan something to the left, it's going to be louder in the left and quieter in the right. So if you pan 100% to the left, it's only going to come out of the left speaker. So I've already got this panned 20% left and right. So the lead is coming out 20% louder in the right, and the ARP is coming out 20% louder in the left. Now keep in mind, in my opinion, panning should be an absolute last resort for this sort of situation where you've got two instruments competing for the same frequencies and you want to isolate them so that they can be heard individually without, changing the instrument or EQing them so heavily that they're not stepping on each other's toes. The absolute last resort, in my opinion, is panning. It can help, but you should be mixing in a way that everything can be heard without panning. So panning should then be an artistic choice. But if you're absolutely up against the wall and nothing's working and you're stubborn like me and you don't want to change anything, panning can help. So this is already panned, like I said, but I'm going to cut out the pan just so we can hear what it sounds like, how well we've mixed it with no additional panning. That's actually not too bad. Something else you can do is switch the master track to mono. This is actually great for testing out your mix. Dude, it sounds super weird because I'm used to the stereo. It sounds like everything is just jammed inside of my brainstem. It's ridiculous. But look, that's a good tool for testing to see if any of your instruments, any of your tracks are getting lost. If you can hear everything fine, then it sounds pretty good in mono, you're on the right track. Then you can unmono, you can play around with the panning. All right, so I think we've done pretty well here. Let's reassess. So in the lead, which we want to ring out nice and clear because it's the lead instrument, we've got a boost at 600 Hertz. In the ARP, we've got a cut at 600 Hertz. Great, we're leaving room for that lead in the lower end there. Next, we have a boost at 2000 in the ARP, and over here, a cut at 2000 in the lead. Good, so we're leaving some room for the ARP because, we don't want it to get lost. It's doing this fun little rhythmic interplay thing there. We want to hear it. Then we've got a boost at 4,400 in the lead, and we're sort of leaving that sitting there. I did try to cut that frequency, but I think the ARP sort of loses something there. Let me try just going 4,000 and not really cutting, just like bringing it back to sort of baseline. All right, that's incredibly subtle, but I'm going to leave that because it's so subtle. And I think that's probably good practice. It's almost stepping on this frequency here, but I think that's going to be fine. I think it sounds a little bit better than the start of the video, and I'm happy with that. I'm going to do more mixing on this, of course, but that's the general principle of how I mix. We want to leave space for each instrument. And yeah, layering exists. Layering is something that you can and perhaps should do. But in all other cases where you're not layering to create whole new sounds, in which case you would mix those layers together as one sound. So if you've got two tracks, for example, two different instruments that are playing the exact same thing, and you want them to sound like they're one instrument or at least one part, and you're not really meant to distinguish between the two instruments within that part, you treat them like one part. You put them in a bus, for example. So we've got like a bass and the counter bass here that are in a bus. So then that bus, I can add EQ for both of those tracks, compression, so on and so forth. But yeah, that's how I mix. I just try to create space. I want to hear all the individual parts. And there we go. I hope that was helpful. Let me know in the comments what you want to see next. But for the moment, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to gently caress that like button. Be excellent to each other, and I'll see you next time. Ricky Summer, out.